Come on in, there's a handout up here. Last one, you're in luck. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin Learned, and I work with entrepreneurs at the Idaho Small Business Development Center, and one of the things I do is help them develop their equity financing plans, and I coach them in their pitching. So that's one half of what I do. The other half of what I do is I help develop angel funds around the country. I work part-time as a vice president for funds for a company called Rain Source Development in St. Paul, Minnesota. They are the godfather of the Boise Angel Fund and 23 other funds. And we're now out trying to create another roughly 125 angel funds around the country. And I guide that effort. So as you might guess, I've heard a gazillion investment pitches, including some of the very, very best and some of the very, very worst. And I heard both yesterday in, where the hell was I? Grand Forks, North Dakota. Okay, so I'm going to go through a little bit of stuff, and then I'm going to tell you about some of these pitches and what I really liked about them. So the point of this exercise is to talk about pitches for the speed dating competition, right? So you have 5 minutes. But before we get you to the 5-minute, that's going to be our time this year at Becky S. Before I get you to that, I want to talk about a more traditional investment pitch that you might make to a group of investors and give you some pointers on that. And I've written a few things out here for you. Let me start by saying that I think the best book that's been written on this is Guy Kawasaki's book, The Art of the Start. I mean, you can buy it for like 15 bucks. It's available in the libraries. You can get it in the bookstores. It's a really well-known book. And he's got a great chapter on pitching. And he starts out by saying, I've never wished the entrepreneur took more time to make their pitch. I've never sat there and wished the entrepreneur gave me his or her life history about how they got into this, which is a polite way of saying nobody gives a damn about that. It's not very interesting to them. And if you think about people who invest for a living or who are quasi-professional investors, as my partners and I are in the Boise Angel Fund, the point of your pitch is to get our attention. We are not going to write you a check, and no investor that's any good is going to write you a check based upon your first pitch to them. The point of the pitch is to get them to ask you to give you more information, to get them to say to you, that's very interesting, I'd like to meet with you, I'd like to understand more about this, I'd like to understand why it is you're doing this, I'd like you to meet my partner. One of those things, that's the point of the pitch. So you don't have to put everything in this pitch. As a matter of fact, don't put everything in the pitch. All you have to do is show an investor this is a significant problem and I have a potentially profitable solution. That's it. Okay? This is an interesting problem and I have a potentially profitable solution. Now, I've given you the information, and when you lose this, you can go to the website for the Boise Angel Fund. I wrote it, put it there, and copied it off of that. But let me make a couple of high-level points. Most entrepreneurs make a mistake. They fall in love with their product, right? Or their service. And they should, because you've been working your butts off for God knows how many months or years at no pay, and no nights, no weekends off, no nights off, no holidays. You've done it, and you're very excited about it. And the thing for you to understand is your product is absolutely uninteresting to the investor. Okay? What is it that's interesting to the investor? Want to take a shot at this? Money. Well, making money is interesting. Okay, that, yes, absolutely. But in getting to that making money, what's important to the investor? Pardon me? Where are the customers coming from? Where am I going to get the customers? That's part of it. But before that, what's the problem you're solving? Okay? What is the problem you're solving? That's what we want to hear about. I'll give you two examples. Can you follow me with the camera if I stand up a little bit? Because I'm an old school teacher and I won't be able to do this without moving around a little bit. I know that, okay? So yesterday I was in Fargo and Grand Forks, North Dakota. Fargo's where the University of North Dakota is, and Grand Forks is where the North Dakota State University, or vice versa. Forgive me, my North Dakota friends. And I listened to two investment pitches, okay? Here's one, the opening line. There are, and I'm making this up, but I'll give you the perspective, there are 3,000 call centers in the world that have more than 1,000 telephone operators in the call center. It costs an average of $1 million in hardware to equip a call center. I can equip a 1,000-person call center for $0. Would that be interesting to you? Sure. I mean, are you going, how the hell do you do that? Okay. He had my attention. Now you better convince me pretty quickly that you're not full of baloney, right? That you really have. So the solution to that is use the cloud. Okay? And these people conveyed to us that they're very reputable. North Dakota is the call center capital of the world. That's where your, you know, all your credit card stuff comes from. So they know a lot about it. These people have worked for call centers, and what they've done is they've created software that runs in the cloud, and all you have to have is a decent internet connection, and they can deliver the whole call center routine through their software to that. What does that eliminate? Don't need buildings, don't need cubicles, don't need about $1 million worth of switches and hardware. Your call center people can work from any place in the world. And then he hooked me by saying the direct cost of us providing $100,000 worth of revenue is about $1,400. So he showed me there's a really interesting situation here, and wow, can I make money at it? I'm going, how can I get a piece of this, okay? Second pitch. Guy comes in, slaps his product on the table, and it's 2-inch fireplace logs. And he says, I bought this company a year ago, I put $150,000 in it, I bought a $500,000 piece of machinery, and I am going to sell fireplace logs to everybody in the country. Now, what questions go through your mind when you hear that?
Who wants that?
Who wants it? I mean, how badly does the world need another fireplace log, right? I mean, now, he got to that by saying the fireplace log market is $750 million a year, 55% of the market is owned by Duraflame. That product is made out of coal tar and chemicals that make it pretty, and the market wants a green product, okay? But I'm still not convinced that he's solving a problem that's a very interesting problem. How many other people can do this? Well, and as you drill down, there's no competitive advantage. The guy makes a 2-inch log that he chips wood product, slice from forests. So you see the difference? One is like, whoa, there are thousands of these, they spend $1 million a piece, they can eliminate all that infrastructure. I want to know more. How do you do that? The other is, I got this really neat product, isn't it beautiful? Who wants to buy another fireplace log? Okay, so that's what I mean by what's the problem. So start with that. You got to get to that like right after. I'm Kevin Learned and the problem I'm solving is X. Okay? Don't do the as the guy did. He gave me 15 minutes of his life history about how he got into the log business. Or was it really that long? It just seemed like it. Okay? So, that's the first one. We say here, most entrepreneurs spend too much time on it. What I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to start with a slide deck, right? And then you're going to work on your pitch. If you're giving a slide deck presentation, one slide on what the product is. One slide, no more. And that slide, by the way, should have no more than 3 bullets, and the size of the font should be half the age of the oldest person in the room. okay? And I'm 65, so that's 32 and a half, if you'd like to know that. Is that right? I think that's right. And recognize that in many investment pitches, because you're pitching to people that have money, they're going to tend to be a little older. And I'll tell you, if I'm sitting back there in the room and you got an investment pitch up here and you got a paragraph up there, I'm not going to read it. All right, so, all right. Second big problem, second big thing to address, and this is what you said, which is, fine, okay, I'm convinced that there's 1,000 call centers out there. How are we going to reach them? You know, how do you find these people? So that go-to-market strategy. And usually the correct answer is not, I'm going to hire some salesmen and we're going to attack the market. Building a direct sales force in almost every business isn't a scalable proposition, will take you 15 years and will burn up millions of dollars. So how are you going to get to the customers? So how do you guess the firewood guy is going to get to the customers? Yeah, we're going to go to the buyers. You know, dude, you live in a town of 500 people in North Dakota. How much further away from the buyers can you get? Okay? The guy with the call center said, we have taken the market and we've segmented it, and there are, and I'm making the numbers up, okay, there are 500 call centers that have between 50 and 150 agents. That's our target market. They all license other people's software, particularly for the CRM function, the customer relationship management function. They've all got this software because you got to know why you're calling a person, you want to capture the notes. He said, that is generally delivered to that market through the cloud. We're going to those people, and they're going to sell this for us. Why will they do that? They get an average of $50 a seat a month for their CRM software. I'll pay them 20% fee if they get my software in there. That will move their $50 a month per seat revenue to $80 a month per seat revenue, and it will cost them nothing. Ooh, but they like that proposition, see? And there are only, 50 of these people in the world, or these companies in the world, and so I can get to them and I have a compelling proposition. So right away now, he's got a problem. He's told me he's got a solution. Do I believe he has a solution? It doesn't matter at the moment. I will do due diligence in due course if I'm interested in learning whether the solution works. I'm willing to stipulate at this point he's got a solution. But he's convinced me he's got a market, and now he's convinced me he's got a rational go-to-market strategy that won't cost $1 million to build a sales force to do it. Okay? Now, a couple of other points, and then we'll come into some of this about your pitches here. Whenever you're going to speak to investors, whether it's the speed dating competition, you got 5 minutes. It's the Boise Angel Fund, you got 15 minutes. I'll be in Minneapolis next week, and we've got a conference at Rainsource Capital, and 5 companies have an opportunity to speak to 300 angels, and they have 7 minutes apiece. That's it, 7 minutes, okay? Now the solution to this, I don't have very much time, is not, therefore, I will talk really fast, okay? And I've seen it time and again. And when you say to somebody, you got 2 minutes left, they go, okay, I only got 2 minutes left, so let me flip right through these slides. Click, 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 You've got to be in command of what you're doing and what it is that you want to convey. So my advice to you is, whatever it is, you're going to prepare your pitch and you're going to practice it to deliver it in less than that amount of time and in a conversational voice at a conversational pace. When you get into the room, whatever it is, it will undoubtedly take you more time than you think. You'll stumble and somebody will ask you a question and it'll go back and forth. So don't use every second of your time. Shorten it and then you'll be relaxed and you'll be able to just focus on the points you want to give. Forget about the jargon. If you work in a specialized industry, then you've got jargon, and often that jargon translates to initials. Okay, so the one criticism I'd have for this guy that had the software for call centers is he said, this is a SaaS application that runs in the cloud. Now, what do you think the typical investors in North Dakota, where'd they get their money? Agriculture and factories, okay? Now, some of them got it from software because Great Plains Software started there and they sold it to Microsoft for $1.1 billion. But as I watched the room, immediately most of the people in the room went, huh? And so for the next 5 minutes, they're trying to figure out what the hell's he talking about. So watch that jargon, what you think is very common jargon, unless you're talking to a group of specialists, assume they don't get any of it. And you're going to explain it in very clear, non-technical terms. Okay, does that help? A little bit? Does that make sense? I guess the last one, and you're not going to make PowerPoints if you're coming to speed dating, but this is not the place to demonstrate that you know 75 different ways to fly stuff across a PowerPoint slide. Okay? Straightforward, no more than 3 bullets per page, per slide, no complete sentences. Think about, I used to be a school teacher, but think about a good teacher that works with a whiteboard or a blackboard. Right? They're talking to you, and I turn around and I write, keep it short. Get to the point. I might even just write point. I might write problem, right? I'm trying to reinforce with you what it is that I'm trying to communicate. Use your slides for that. Your slides are not a substitute for a business plan or a written investment presentation. They are simply to keep the audience with you so that they can understand what you're saying. Slides are a great place if you're going to talk numbers, to get some numbers up there. But if you do, for goodness sakes, you know, the size of the market is $429,378,232.41, right? 478 million is plenty. All right, so much for that. Any questions on it? Anybody want to discuss anything or challenge me anything on that, or ask more about that? Turn your piece of paper over then. I've put on here for you Guy Kawasaki's 10 slides, and having told you to use those, I then add an 11th. We got one? So, title slide, you know, who are you and what's your email address now and what's your phone number? And the reason you might, and what's the name of your company? The reason you want to do that is, in spite of your very best efforts, almost none of them will have actually read the stuff before you get there. They will listen, and ultimately, if they're interested, they'll get a copy of that slide deck. How do I get a hold of you? Okay? And then look at what he addresses. Next one. I don't think I brought the book with me, darn it. I was kind of rushed out of the office when Becky called me. What's the problem? That's what he says. What's the problem you're addressing? What's your solution to the problem? This is the product. What's your business model? Okay, we are a Chapter C corporation, and you know, we have some positions there. Here's the way we're going to address the market. The underlying magic. Now, in almost everything, it's not enough to simply say, I'm going to address the call center market with a SaaS system in the cloud. So he spent a little time on the how does this work and why can nobody else do this, right? So he puts a little diagram up there. It's got arrows and things. I don't really remember that, but I do remember that he's filed 14 patents for the underlying magic. So he's convinced me right off the bat he's probably got something that cannot be easily taken away from him or competed away. Okay, what's the secret that you have? Sometimes we call it the secret sauce. How are you going to go to the market? What is the competition? Let's see, I should give you the, what does really turn off an investor? This is such a unique product that there is no competition. The investor hears, this is such a dumb idea that nobody's ever attacked this market before. Okay, of course there's competition. Now maybe the competition is substitutes and you've got a disruptive technology that's eliminating the old way, but there's always competition. The competition is don't do whatever it is you're proposing they're doing. So there's always competition and you want to address it. The other, by the way, rule, yeah?
How deep do you go in talking about competition?
You only got a few moments, right? So what you want to do is acknowledge that there is competition out there, that you understand that you're not naive about it, and that when we have our discussion, I'll be able to address why I'm better than all the competitors. Okay, so we're kind of hitting this. Have you thought about the basic things that have to happen in order to take over a market, gain market share, and produce a profitable company? While I'm on it as a sidebar, the other ones you want to avoid is there are 300 billion people in China. All we need is 1% of the market. We call that the 1% of the China syndrome. And of course, mathematically, that's true. But it begs the question, why would 1% of all the Chinese want to use your product, and how will you get at them? So we want to see that you've been thoughtful in developing your market. You know, this guy said there are 3,000 call centers, a segment like this. The target we're going after are the 150 that have between 50 and 250 seats. And I can reach them because here's the people that talk to them. And then when we get into his projections, you know, all he needs is about a 3 or 4% share of the market to prove his concept and be able to sell his business. Okay. Let's see. No competition. 1%. Oh, and the other one is when you get to the pro formas, and these are really conservative numbers. I have never, ever heard an entrepreneur stand in front of me and say, these are wild-ass guesses and they're probably terribly optimistic, right? Of course you believe they're conservative numbers. The way you're going to convince me is by telling me what your very conservative assumptions are, okay? You want to lead me to the conclusion that, you know, this is a reasonable plan. This guy, he's not out there saying he's going to get to $1 billion worth of sales in the next 3 years, okay? He's got a reasonable assumption. So, we're not going to get 1% of the market. Don't say these are conservative numbers. And I already forgot the third one I said. All right. Oh, no competition. Yeah. Then a slide on the team. At some point, you have to convince us that you can do this. Okay? So here is my team. I'm Kevin Learned. Here's my background, and not the resume. 2 or 3 bullet points. You know, I'm Kevin Learned. I started a software company here in 1973 along with my partner Gary Mon. We built it to a nationwide company. We had a successful exit. Okay? Now, I'm willing to take that on if you say so. Later, I will want to take your resume and go check that. But at this stage, oh, cool. All right, I guess you know something about the software market. So a little bit about the team, and I think terrifically helpful is an acknowledgement of what you don't have on that team. You are not going to bullshit a decent, sophisticated investor. They have been down this path many times. You will be way better off to acknowledge where you're weak. I'm working with a company now, and they know that they're going to need to bring in a CEO. They've done a good job of getting it to this point, but they got one guy that's a sales guy and one guy that's a technology guy. And rather than they're trying to dance in front of a group of investors who have looked at many, many businesses, many people, and pretend like they're going to be able to do this, they're out front saying, we believe we need this much money to do this. One of the things we want to use that for is we believe that we need to attract a CEO that can help us execute this plan. And we hope as angels that you'll be able to help us do that. I want to tell you, that's pretty refreshing. Pretty refreshing. So, a little bit about your background, and if you don't know squat about some aspect of business, right, and nobody knows it all, you've got to cover, you know, whatever the production of it is. So if it's technology, who's the CTO, who's going to do that? You got to cover the financial part. Somebody's got to look after the money. You've got to cover the go-to-market piece. And then somebody's got to make sure that it all hangs together. So it's a CEO or an operations person that can make sure that we're going to go execute this. And if you're missing any of those, then you want to put an org chart up there that says, here's who we are, here's who we're missing, and we know that within 6 months, a year, 2 years, we're going to have to fill that slot. We intend to get it to this point, and then we'll go after somebody. A slide on financial projections and metrics. Do not reproduce your Excel spreadsheet with 14 rows and columns on a PowerPoint slide. Pictures are really good. And we all know the one thing that's absolutely 100% certain about your projections is they're wrong. So let's not kid each other. Here's my best shot. Here's what I believe will happen. And if you've got a graph that shows sales doing this, and you got something that shows what's going to happen to cash, what's going to happen to profits, that's sufficient at this stage. I believe that with an investment of $500,000, we can grow this company from the current $50,000 a year to about $1 million in sales in 3 years, and at that time we will need more capital. Okay? And you can have a little picture of that. But don't try to put a lot of numbers up. Now, if your business has some aspect in its metrics that's particularly mind-blowing, then you might want to put that up there. You know, what's your margin rate, what's your cost to go into market, you know, something, whatever it is, but you can't put very much on a slide and talk about very much. So you want to, what are the key metrics that I want to convey to you that we're going to be able to do in this business plan? Now that's Kawasaki's 10 slides. I like to know, how am I going to get my money back? Now, Kawasaki says, don't bother, because they all know the answer to that is you're going to sell the business. I'm not so sure. I listened to this guy with his wood product, and in the application where it says exit strategy, it was blank. So I said, so, you know, how do I make money as an investor in this? He says, oh man, he says, this is going to be such a profitable company, we're all going to be really happy. I said, well, okay, but how do I get my money back? Well, he says, a company this profitable will take it public. You know, well, the bullshit antenna are now going like this. Dude, there have been like 50 IPOs in the last 4 years, and none of them are going to be for wood products. You know, I mean, right away, it's like, and finally I said to the guy, I said, so the standard model for these kinds of investors are, we put our money in, we help you grow the company, and we're going to sell the company to somebody. That's because that's the way we're going to get out. Is that an acceptable strategy to you? He says, oh no, he says, man, he says, my 20-year-old son's coming into the business. We're going to build the greatest family business in the world. Well, cool, but there's not any room for me in there with that, right? So I like to hear something on what's the plan. Now, again, we know it's speculative, okay? The guy with the call center said, look, SaaS applications that have a hockey stick growth potential are currently selling for 5 to 8 times revenue. Here are companies that are acquisitive in this industry. Over the last 2 years, they bought, these 4 companies have been purchased. Now, that's really hard information to get. You may not be able to get it. But if you go into the trade journals and start nosing around, maybe you'll get lucky. But that, I'm going to sell the business, I have to get it to here to make it saleable, and here's the kind of price we could expect. Okay? And based upon that, you know, the investors are real good at doing the math on this. Okay, you want me to put $500,000 in. What's your pre-money valuation? Do I need to stop on it? Do you guys know what a pre-money value, would you like me to talk? Let me talk about that, not embarrass anybody. If you and I agree that your business as is, where is, the way it is today is worth $1 million. Okay, and you want $500,000 worth of new capital. And I reach into my pocket and I write you a check for $500,000 and you put it in the bank. How much is your business now worth? $1.5 million. what percentage of that did I just put into the business? I get a third of the business, right? That's the math in this industry. You want to be able to do it. Everybody talks about, you know, what's the pre-money valuation? How much am I trying to raise? Yeah.
Is there a method that you prefer? EBITDA?
No,
discount cash?
no. At early stage businesses, the valuation is, I don't know. Now, you know, you're hearing Learned's points on this, and if you go out and talk to John Glarem, he has a different view, okay? And I respect that. We're colleagues. We both do the same thing. He likes to take the projections and discount them back and for various risks. And, you know, it all ought to triangulate on the same thing. I'm much more intuitive. I participate in 2 conference calls a month, one with about 15 angel groups from here to Seattle, and one with about 20 angel groups from here to St. Paul. And we go through the deals we're looking at, and we go through the valuations. And so you get this sense, okay? If you have a company that is pre-revenue, in today's market for capital, it would be very, very unusual for you to get a valuation higher than $1 million or $1.5 million. If you come in and say, I got this fabulous deal. It's all built out. We're just ready to go to the market. All we need is $1 million to take it to a market. I'll give you 20% of the company for your $1 million. Okay, I'm going to go click. He's got a $4 million pre-money valuation. I don't think so. Right? And it could be the world's greatest idea, but I'm not playing. And so much of this takes place in that kind of environment. This is your early stage, can I get you interested in it? So you need to put something out there that says, I'm reasonable. We all understand that you want as high a valuation as you can. You understand the investor wants as low a valuation as I can get. Truth and fairness and justice is someplace in the middle, probably. Okay. Let me finish up then, and then we'll have a discussion. Let me take this then to the speed dating. So, we're going to sit probably in this room, and we'll have these tables, and we'll have, how are we going to take on?
We're up to 10. It's going to be a Perkins police
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 of you. So there'll be 10 judges, 10 tables, 10 entrepreneurs. And if I'm one of the judges, I'll be sitting here at the table, and the bell will ring, and you will sit down, and you will say, hi, and you got 5 minutes to make your pitch to me. And then the bell rings. And I got 5 minutes to say, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like. And the point of this is pitch practice, right? And boy, I'll tell you, I really, really encourage you to go through this. It is way more fun than it sounds like, and you're going to get a lot of feedback, and you're going to get from people that nobody is going to say, that's the dumbest damn thing I ever heard of, right? They're going to be supportive of you, but you're going to get good critical comments, because that's the point. Now, from having been a judge in this for umpty-ump times, and I'm going back to South Dakota to be a judge in theirs in a couple more weeks, here's a couple of thoughts, right? You've only got 5 minutes. So you have to tell me there is a problem that exists that people will pay money to solve. That's the first thing. Now, you can get at it a variety of ways. You can be Socratic and ask me questions. Do I know, you know, how many... One year we had a guy that was working on alcoholic rehab centers, I think. Do you know how many alcoholics there are in the state of Idaho? No, I don't. Okay, where are we going with this? Okay, but he said, would you be surprised to know there are, you know, 50,000 and yada, yada, yada. So there's a problem that exists. That's the first thing you've got to convey to me. If you don't get me to understand that, the rest of it is pointless. Now, I have a solution to that problem, and the solution is one that you and I can both make money on. And here's how I plan on taking it to the market. And finally, and you should believe that I can do this because. Now, if you convey those 4 things with a little bit of, back to that there's a solution that exists so we can both make money. So you're going to work in there someplace a little bit about how the money thing's going to work. You've got my attention. And if you've only got 5 minutes, and if you're only going to plan on using 4.5 of those, you know, that's about 2 sentences per deal. So that, a couple thoughts. Sorry to be so random. We hear them over and over again, and that, if you can cover those points and be relaxed while you're doing it, you're going to get some wonderful feedback. It takes, remember what Mark Twain said? You know, I'm sorry, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. Right? It is way harder to write a sentence about what your business concept is than it is to write 5 pages. No college students have figured that out yet. Of course, when they get a 5-page paper, they agonize over it. That's the easiest part. When I was teaching, all of my assignments were no more than 1 page, double-spaced, and then you finally get, and I got to be able to read the type, and you can't take it to the margin, right? And you know, tell me what the problem is and what you're going to do about it, and that's as much room as you have. So that exercise, and you're going through this process, you want to work and work and work. Try to answer these 4 points I've given you with a sentence or 2, and then you want to practice them so that you can give it without looking at your notes. You can come in, you can be relaxed, and you can engage me in a dialogue. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down at the first table, and I'm the judge, and I'm going to listen to it, and when I get to my time, I'm going to say, Lisa, you know, that was really good, but I really didn't quite understand the magnitude of the problem and how you're going to make money on it, so you might think about yada, yada, yada. You're going, okay, more on the problem, and think about that. Then you go to Becky's table, and you change your pitch, right? And she says, you know, you spent way too much time telling me about the problem and how you're going to make money on it, okay? And of course, you're going to get conflicting advice. So what we see typically is for the first 3 or 4, the pitches get better and better, and then they get disorganized as people are going, what the hell are you guys telling me? My advice to you is for the first 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of the 10 stations you're going to be at, just take it under advisement and give the same pitch again and see if the next judge gives you the same feedback. Otherwise, you're going to really confuse yourself and the judges in the process too. Now, you know, if they give you some piece of feedback that causes you to go, wow, I never thought about that, of course that's right. I mean, work that into your pitch. But the kind of, I would have liked to have known more about this, wait and see if anybody else tells you that, because you're getting idiosyncratic information as it goes on. All right, now what would you guys like to talk about? Yes?
What's the size of a value, a market value that an investor organization is interested in? Is there a threshold where they
Okay, sure. So the question is, what's the size of the value that an investor organization might be interested in? And it depends on where you are in the business cycle, okay? So if you're early stage entrepreneur, what do I mean by early stage? I got an idea. That's really early stage. I've got a prototype. That's not quite so early. I've got a prototype and I've got some beta customers. I've got the first release out and I have 6 paying customers. Okay, each one of those, all the way to, you know, I've got the Northwest fairly well saturated and I want to take the product to the rest of the country or the rest of the world. So if you think about risk along that continuum, presumably from the I have an idea and I need some money to test it out, to the I have a profitable company but we need more capital in order to really take this thing to the next level, is significantly different risk. And return, expected return is related to risk. The Boise Angel Fund tends to invest in the, I have a few customers and some revenue. I'm bleeding cash like crazy, and what I need now is money to develop a marketing organization to take this to a regional market, okay? And that investment profile will typically translate to an expected rate of return of 50% per year for as long as the money's at work. And the rule of thumb on that is if I give you money and I get 50% per year internal rate of return, 5 years from now you have to give me back 10 times what I invested. So that is easy math. So you'll hear Angel say, okay, has he got a 10x return? Can she give me a 10x return in the process? Part of the reason is because the math's real easy in my head, right? Back to our example, you have $1 million pre-money valuation, you need $500,000. That means it's worth $1.5 million after I put the money in. If there's no other investors when we sell this company, I need $5 million. So then we go through our how much might we sell the company for. We think if we meet all of these projections, we don't need more capital, we can sell the company for $20 million. Okay, well, what percentage of the company do I need if I put $500,000 in and we're going to sell it for $20 million? Right? I'm going to need $5 million back. I'm going to sell it for $20 million. I need 25% of the company. So I might back into the valuation then. My example is not very good because that gives you a higher valuation. If that's the case, you need $500,000. We can sell the company in 5 years for $20 million. I need 25% of the company then. You need $500,000. Therefore, your pre-money today is worth $1.5 million. $1.5 million plus 500,000 gets me to $2 million. 500,000 divided by 2 million is 25%. I would tell you this. The last conference I went to, one of the speakers said to the investors out there, how many of you have sat through a pitch when the angel says, I need $500,000 and that's all the money I will ever need? And everybody raised their hand. And then he said, and how many has that ever been the case? And everybody lowered their hand. All investors will assume that you will need more money and therefore I will get diluted. So if I go through that calculus to say I put in $500,000 today, I need $5 million back 5 years from now, you're going to sell the company for $20 million, therefore I need 25% of the company. I'm then going to adjust that by what dilution am I going to have when you do the second round, okay? Gee, you know, I'm only going to own, at that rate, I'm only going to own 20% of the company, so that'd only give me $4 million back. So I got to either lower your valuation or understand how you're going to sell the company for more money. So in many of the investors, it starts with that kind of calculus. For the entrepreneurs, it usually starts with, good God, I've put $300,000 of my own money in here. I've got my mom and my dad and my grandma and my aunt and my cousins in here, and I've worked for 4 years for no salary. When I add all that up, it must be worth $2 million. Okay, but remember, of course, that sunk cost has no relevance to the value today. What did you get for that? That's a long-winded answer to your question. The unknowable question is how much will we sell the company for within some reasonable period of time?
That's where your projections would come in.
Sure. I was working on a valuation this afternoon. And if you want help, by the way, I put my appointment phone number on there. You're welcome. I take on clients. I work 20 hours a week at the SBDC, and what I do is work with people like you to help you get ready to raise money. And it is a messy and nonlinear process, okay? But I was working on it today, and my projections are that this particular company could be sold for 1.5 to 2 times revenue in 4 to 5 years, okay? And I bracketed it. If we sold it for 1.5 times revenue in 4 years, and we have 23% of the company at the time it's sold, what do we get back? And then I did it again. If we sold it for 2 times revenue in 5 years, what do we get back? And then you can run an internal rate of return on that. And that ranged from 38% if we sold it in 4 years at 1.5 times to about 65% if we sell it at 2 times in 5 years. So I bracket it, and that will help the investors say, okay, you know, the statistics say we ought to be able to sell this thing for 2 times revenue, but of course that doesn't always happen, and we don't know what the market's going to be in 5 years from now. But it is probably, that bracket is probably big enough, the lower end of it is high enough to say to people, there's a reasonable opportunity here if this works out that you'll make some good money on it.
Is that 1.5 to a common multiple of what the company?
No, that's a common multiple in this particular industry for a SaaS product, okay?
Every industry has ranges or
Yep.
averages.
And some of them it's well known, and some of them it is, we're invested in 2 food companies, and you know, there have been commercial food companies for like a hell of a lot of years. And so it's pretty well known if you can get a food product company to about $20 million without covering the whole country, right? I mean, in other words, there's growth potential to $200, $300, $400, $500 million in this market that you probably can sell that company in, and I can't quote you the numbers, but it's a multiple, it's 1 to 2 times sales, something like that. So we can work on that for what would it take, what do we think it's going to take to get this company to that point? Now it starts with, is there a problem? Is the problem big enough? Will people pay? How much will they pay? What is reasonable to assume that you might be able to penetrate in that market without going broke with your sales and marketing costs? And then it's a messy, triangular process. The investors that have been doing this have all sorts of ways of getting you back to the valuation that they think it's worth. So you may think you're a really good negotiator and they only want to give you $1.5 million valuation, and you've managed to convince them that they'll accept a $2 million valuation, but I can guarantee you they will have preferences and puts and ratchets and a whole bunch of other things in there that if you don't make your projections, they will get their return and you won't. So you don't want to accept an unreasonable valuation. I don't mean that. But you also don't want to fall on your sword trying to get some valuation so that you can brag to your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your spouse or whatever, look at how good I did. And the fact that people talk about this, and there are rules of thumb, but there is this kind of market. And the market today, whatever the valuation was before the market crashed 2 years ago, it's probably half that today. And while the market has come back and the economy has turned, valuations in these kinds of businesses has not really gone up. And you either accept that or you wait until valuations get better. Now, as a sidebar, there's billions of dollars in venture capital floating around there looking for a home. And the average return to venture capital investments over the last 10 years has been less than 0. And if you're sitting on $1 billion worth of capital, you've got to put it to work in big chunks. And it's a problem. So the angel market is people writing their own checks, and so they're writing $5 or $10 or $25 or $100,000 checks, but not $50 million checks. And there will be more willing to work with you on a smaller basis. What else can I talk about?
Just you mentioned you can believe in me. I guess could you elaborate more on that? Just
Sure. So I think there are 3 things that it takes to make a business. Okay? It takes an idea. It takes money, and it takes management. Now, ideas aren't worth very much. And I know you've got yours and you think it's the greatest idea in the world and it's your baby and you ought to get paid a lot of money for it. But if you'd like to know how much ideas are really worth, go see how many patents have been issued in the history of the country and figure out what percentage of them ever produced a dime of revenue. And it's like less than 1%. So an idea by itself, the potential is, the probability is that it's not going to amount to anything. Just kind of the law of large numbers. What will make it amount to something? Well, you have to have money. It takes money to do this, but money is a necessary but insufficient condition for success. What's it really going to take is who can execute on the idea, right? So you somehow have to convince me, if I'm going to write a check for you, that you in fact can do what you purport to do. And you and I both know when we take all the bravado off that this is an enormously difficult thing to do. Boise Angel Fund has made 10 investments. If we are typical of other groups, 4 of those will go bankrupt. 3 or 4 or 5 of those will be in the living dead category. That is, they never will live up to their expectations, but they'll never die. And 1 or 2 of them perhaps will actually make serious money. If we're really fortunate, 2, in which case we'll be very happy investors. If we've been smart, maybe 1. And if the luck doesn't fall our way, none. So this is really high-risk investing. And what makes the difference is, can you do it? Can you execute on your business plan? And when we get into due diligence after we've checked off all the common stuff you'd think, you know, we're going to do background check on you. If you got software, we're going to get somebody that can read the code to study the code and see if it's put together in a logical fashion, it appears to be supportable, and it doesn't have a bunch of somebody else's code in it. We're going to go talk to customers. Do they really like the product? Are they really getting benefits from it? We're going to try it ourselves. All that's kind of yep, 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 yep. The big unknown is, can you do this? So, something that convinces us that you've got a fighting chance to be able to execute this, or you recognize where you're weak and you understand that people will have to be brought in to do that. Now, the corollary of that is entrepreneurs, and I am one, I are one so I know, are typically crappy managers, right? Because execution management really isn't very much fun. All the exciting is in the creating, and after it's created, somebody's got to sell this thing and do this stuff. And it's plain hard work. And there's some people that are good at it and some that are not very good at it. We have a little phrase elsewhere on the Boise Angel Fund site that says, under personnel, you should have experience in managing a rapidly growing company, or be prepared to explain to us where that experience is coming from. Because we're not interested in paying the dumb tax for you to learn that. What that really means is, if this thing takes off, we're all going to have a conversation about it's going to be in everybody's best interest to go out and find somebody to run that. And that was probably the very best way that you could make money. I've got one of our deals now, and tomorrow the board is meeting to approve the new CEO. And I can't go any further than that, but the entrepreneur who's been at this now 3 years, she's tired. And she really realizes, as do those of us on the board and the investors, that it's time to bring in somebody that can take it to the next level. And she's going to go off and be chief scientist. And that's what she really loves to do. And we're all happy. It doesn't always turn out that way, and the hardest conversation is when we have to have the conversation with you that it's time for you to move out of the way and you don't want to go. So we're going to try to address that early on, because we don't want to have that conversation. That's a long they're all long-winded answers to it. Tell us about your background a little bit. Why can we have confidence that you know what you're talking about? The guy that had the wood product, right? You know, I bought this a year ago. I put $150,000 into it. Before I bought this company, I used to drive trucks or I used to do something. I mean, you know, he had, as you can tell, no credibility with us. The guy that had the call center said, well, you know, I've run 4 call centers and I've been a vice president of yada yada company. And my partner here has been the chief technology officer of 3 of them. Cool. Sounds like they know what they're talking about. Remember, all you're trying to get to at this point is to get me to ask questions or get me to say, that's interesting, I want to know more. That help? Yep.
Kevin, in your networking with these angel groups and everything, you obviously went into lockdown, you went into recession. The question is, are deals getting made? Do you foresee the rate of deals getting made increasing, stagnant?
Yeah.
What's the environment?
That's it's an excellent question. So far as I can tell, and I've been to 6 angel fund meetings in the last 6 days in the Dakotas, and I'll be to a bunch more in the Twin Cities next week in our own. Deals are still getting done, but they're getting done at lower valuations than what they used to get done at. And if you're not willing to accept that reality, then you won't get any money. Now, we did 3 deals last year. We did 3 deals a year before. I think we did 3 deals a year before that. Apparently, we do about 3 deals a year. We didn't intend to do that, but that seems to be how it works out. And so when I go back and look at it, we've been in the market here in Boise, and we've done our deals. It's terribly competitive, right? I mean, round terms, we've formally looked at 175 deals, and we've done 9 of them. A couple more that we may do this fall. So those 9 think that there's money out there. All the others think that it's really hard to get or we're really stupid. And we are stupid in some of them because obviously you pass on some of them that you wished you'd done. An awful lot of them simply are not reasonable business investments, and you know, we are not convinced that the need exists or that the solution you have will solve the need or that you can do it. But I am seeing deals, the answer is yes, deals are getting done.
So the pucker factor is subsided?
Yeah, I think April of 2009 till about September of 2009 was the real and I think it's loosened up. I'll tell you this, my own philosophy is that the world has changed and that the old model doesn't work anymore, but that there are really interesting models in the new world. And I have listened to several of them recently, and those, I come back to the call center since I've talked about that. A disruptive model that can take enormous costs out of an industry is an interesting proposition. And if the people can convince us that they can do it, and that they have a go-to-market strategy, they will attract money. A Me Too deal, or I figured out a way to do something a little bit better, or a product that's in a crowded industry, or a product that's in an industry where people are no longer spending money, those are not as interesting a deals. I spoke to the Mountain Home Chamber of Commerce about, I don't know, two and a half years ago, just as we were kind of, you know, everybody was going, oh my God, the world's ending. And so, you know, the advice was, these are small business people in a small community, scared for their livelihood, and the advice was pull in your horns, be very careful, manage your costs, hang on. So I go down there in August to talk to them again. You know, I bet there are 30 more people in the room than there were 2 years ago. And they have survived. Now, are they happy? No, they're not. And they're all going, okay, I've hung on, when's it going to get better? And I think the answer is it's not going to get better. So how are you going to make money doing what you're doing? And my illustration of that was, some of you, did any of you go to the, when Google was here and they put on their little 1-hour deal over at Boise State, you know? We put on seminars at the Small Business Development Center all year. We get 10 to 20 people. We got 400 at that one. That's a sign of something. And then Google said 85% of all consumer purchases start on the internet. That's an amazing number. If it's only 60%, it's still an amazing number. So when I went to Mountain Home, I said that, and I get from some of them who are more primarily older people in a small town, that doesn't apply to me. And I said, oh, but it does. Because every day another 19-year-old airman arrives out there at that Air Force base. How the hell do you think he's going to find you? He is not going to look in the yellow pages. Right? If you haven't claimed your spot on Google when he goes ice cream Mountain Home, you're not going to get his business. So that's, the world's different, and we're going to have to be different to survive. Google said 85% of all consumer product purchases start with an internet search. Now, there's probably some qualification to that. Every time I go to buy milk, I don't look on the internet to see where I should go. But if you look at your own behavior, I don't know if any of you, I mean, for years, of course, they leave the phone book on the doorstep and you stick it in a drawer someplace, and the next year you take that one and put it in the recycle, and you put the new one in the drawer. This year, for the first time, I picked it up from the doorstep and put it in the recycle bin. I didn't even open it. I didn't even put it in the drawer, right? What am I going to do with that? I am not going to look for you in the yellow pages. Amen. Anything else you'd like to talk about? Sure.
We were touching on, there's just different levels when having a little bit of product or nothing to start with. We are kind of in a place where we have finished product that you have to order in huge quantities to get it going. And that's where we're lacking funding, trying to find funding to get that going, because we don't have enough capital to get that initial jump start. If there's some way that we can get, samples to kind of show somebody as an investor that, look, we do have this, we've formulated that, is that better than just going up and, showing the ingredient sheet or, maybe mock-up labels, or what would you suggest?
So I think the question is, we've got a product concept, but it's very expensive to start production.
Yes.
And therefore we need money to go forward, okay? And so what do we do with that? Now, never say never. Entrepreneurship is often about persistence, and maybe you'll find somebody that captures the vision. It probably won't be a typical financial investor, which is what kind of the angel groups represent. Who might be interested in this? Somebody that understands the marketplace, okay? And that could really get their arms around what you're doing and say, I understand this. Really the risk here that a financial investor that doesn't understand this industry will perceive, it's not that risky. I'll take this risk on because So you're going to look for somebody that can understand the risk they're assuming. He asked the question about, is money available today? And my answer was yes, money's flowing in the entrepreneurship arena for equity capital. Where money is not flowing is out of the banks. And again, the world has changed. So in the old days, if you had solid inventory and solid receivables, you didn't have to make money to qualify for a bank loan. they would loan you 50% of the inventory and 75% of the receivables, assuming that it was good inventory and good receivables. That's no longer the case. They're not going to loan you money until you also have a financial statement that shows that you're cash flowing. And people are critical of the banks, but my sense is that that's what the regulators have told the banks to do. And they're criticizing those loans. And so you're seeing people whose loans have performed get their loan lines cut back or canceled because even though they've got the collateral, the cash flow's not working in it, and that world has changed. Well, our marvelous capitalistic system will adjust. I had discussions last week with RainSource, the organization that I'm associated with, and we're trying to create a venture leasing fund and a subordinated debt venture fund to go after those markets. Now, I don't, you know, I'm not in the big dollar business, so that's my partners over there trying to do that, and I hope they can. What does that mean if you say venture leasing? Well, in the old days, you know, if the collateral was there, and you know, and they had enough money to make a down payment, you could get a lease. Today, you can't get it unless you're cash flowed. So I think other people will take that risk, but they'll say this. You know, if the cap rate in the old days was 6% on the lease, the cap rate today will be 15% on the lease, and we'll want warrants to go along with it. You know, we're going to, you know, in order to justify taking that risk, we're going to sweeten the pot. Same thing with a subordinated debt risk sort of sets between classic secured debt and the equity folks. And, you know, some people think there's good money to be made taking that risk that banks used to take that no longer they'll take. So I think we'll see financial instruments develop to help those, but it takes time and new devices have to be created, and I wouldn't bank your business plan on new financial devices coming, but changes will happen over time. Are we done? It's great fun to be with you. I hope that's helpful. If I can be of assistance to you, and you know, without trying to make eye contact with those that are in this room, some of you have been my clients or are my clients, and I hope it was helpful. If you would like to talk more to me about this, or you've got something specific that you'd like to talk about, or you'd like help with valuation, or how might I structure a financing plan, or is it even reasonable for me to think I might be able to raise capital, then the telephone number on there is the appointments desk at the Small Business Development Center. You simply call them up and say, I heard this dude learned to speak the other night, can I get on his calendar? And they'll find a time that'll work for you and me, okay? It's free, and there's no obligation to do that. And as long as you and I both believe it's helpful, you can keep coming back as many times as you want. All right? Becky, thanks for inviting me to do this. Great fun to be with you. Thank you.